Welcome to Critical DMG, a podcast about two best friends who might have grown up but never grew out of their love for the Game Boy. We will be playing and reviewing every North American title released on Nintendo's original handheld console. This is episode 41. I'm Tony, and like most legends, this one is about context and interpretation.
And I'm Jeff, and today we are talking about the Final Fantasy Legend.
The Final Fantasy Legend.
The Final Fantasy Legend. Before we begin, we did just kind of want to throw out that I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of experience with this game. We are going to be talking, kind of as we usually do, a bit more broad and things like that. So if you feel like we misspeak, if there are things that you catch, just know we're talking kind of broadly about the game.
They trust us. If you're listening to the show by this point, I mean, I guess unless this is your first episode, which if that's the case, hello, welcome to the show. But anyone who's listened thus far, they know. They know what they're here for. Jeff and I are trying to make sure that we show enough of the game more than we usually would. For anyone watching the footage, Jeff's footage is going to stay more toward the beginning of the game, and mine is going to be after.
Yep. So I will put in the final, boss battle in mine, so I guess spoilers. With that out of the way, Tony, what is your immediate opinion on Final Fantasy Legends?
My opinion on this game is a big yes, and I cannot wholeheartedly recommend this one up front, but I guess we can hash it out between the two of us.
Yeah, I think I'm also a yes, maybe with a little bit of an asterisk, but we'll get into that. Do you want to give us the back of the box?
I do. The Final Fantasy Legend, except no substitutes. Except when the sequel comes out, I guess. The Final Fantasy Legend. Fantastic fun. The Final Fantasy Legend takes you on a sensational voyage through 4 fantastic worlds: land, ocean, space, and future city. You and your band of warriors seek to overpower zombies, goblins, and dreadful monsters hidden along the way. Secret clues lead you to the exotic weapons and treasures you'll need to stay alive. Your quest? To save paradise from the evil Ashura devils. They're wicked and treacherous. It takes all the spirit and cunning you can muster to claim victory. Once you've started, there's no turning back. Are you daring enough? And then the screenshots for this one actually have some little blurbs underneath them. So one says, more than 170 vile monsters are just waiting for you to make their day. Assemble your own special fighting force of 4 from this fearless bunch of humans, espers, and monsters. Your adventure expands from one outlandish setting to the next as you master the 4 worlds.
So it sounds like that's probably more of the Japanese, box. Because in the US, they're mutants, not espers.
I know.
But we'll get into that later. This game released in September of 1990, published by Square. And yeah, there were multiple differences between the Japanese release and the US release. In Japan, it was SaGa. It was not a Final Fantasy branded game.
Nope.
They changed that coming to the US. Probably to drive sales and to get that brand recognition, but that one of many things I think that were changed when it went outside of Japan.
Oh yeah, this is definitely one of the first games that we've had on the show that has serious discrepancies between the original Japanese release and the one that we got here in North America. We've had some things between games, like little changes to sprites or text that's been, relabeled and stuff. Because of the scope of the story and how much mechanical stuff there is in here, this is the first one that has some really apparent splits between the two of them that we'll have to get into.
Yep. I mean, there's a lot of background and a lot of things we could say in this section. Do you want to dive deeper into any of those things, or?
I do have some stuff that I will save for the respective, actual sections, mechanical and aesthetic stuff. I feel they tie in a little bit better there, and I don't want to overload the front end of this episode, but I do want to say that the Final Fantasy versus SaGa split here really can't be overstated. if you were going into this thinking Final Fantasy in whatever that might mean to you in this era of video games, think Final Fantasy 1 or 2 or any of the other 8-bit Final Fantasies, it is not that. If you know the SaGa games, like they are a long winding series of games that I believe is still going even today, that's what this was. So I read that originally it was going to be Great Warrior Saga here in the North American territories, instead of just strictly renamed to Final Fantasy. I think that would have probably been fine, and I maybe set some expectations more accordingly, at least for me anyway. But I do like that the Japanese title tells you exactly what the game is.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy Legend is very open. You don't necessarily know what that means. The Japanese title is Makaitoshi Saga, which a pretty literal translation would be like Demon World Tower Warrior Saga.
A bit on the nose.
That's basically exactly what you're doing.
Yep. With that, let's jump into the mechanics and we can talk a little bit about, why that is such an apt name.
Yeah, let's climb that tower.
So this is, as you would expect, probably our first hardcore RPG.
Yeah.
So role-playing game, leveling up your characters, all that fun stuff. Your goal is to scale the tower to paradise or, RPG things. You're going around leveling your characters, building your team, and, you have some esoteric reason why you're doing that.
Of course.
You're fighting demons to scale the tower that is going to deliver you to paradise. Controls, relatively straightforward and standard. D-pad moves you around. A and B, let you navigate the menus. And then start and select open various different menus. Tony, as opposed to what we usually do, where I ask about your gameplay, I propose that before we get into our own personal experiences too much, we go through what I think is really maybe the key thing that makes this game a little bit different, at least in my eyes. And we talk about the 3 different kind of character classes and how they work and what makes those different classes unique.
Yeah, it's probably better to just talk about them up front instead of having to constantly excuse ourselves throughout our talk. So my team was a mutant, which was me, and then 2 humans, which was you and my wife, and then a monster, which was my 9-year-old.
Okay, so that's the exact same team. I had 2 humans, 1 monster, 1 mutant.
Nice.
What was your favorite class out of them?
Ooh.
And which one do you want to start with?
I would say that we should start with the human.
Okay.
Just because it's probably the easiest to just cover really quickly. But my favorite was either the mutant or the monster. It's a toss-up between the 2 of them, but the human is the easiest to just kind of knock out.
All right. So human, you can be male, female, and they're pretty much I would say the baseline character. They can use essentially everything. They can't cast spells because they have no mana stat. But they can use pretty much any weapon. You can equip the most things to them, so they don't have anything kind of blocked off in their inventory. You can equip multiple weapons, multiple armor, which we'll get into those things later. And to level them up, you have to buy items to level them up. So if you want to level their strength stat, you have to buy a strength potion, we'll say. It's just called strength.
I think it's a potion, yeah.
Yeah, it's just called strength. But you have to buy a thing that costs gold, and then you can level up your character. So you get a bit more customization, I would say, on how you want to level. If you want to level strength, agility, when you want to level their hit points, etc. Pretty bog standard as you would. Pretty much, the base class of the game.
Right. Whereas a mutant is more like what you would expect, I guess, from a typical RPG sort of combat reward system. the stats on the mutants change at basically every handful of fights, and that can be good or bad, because even though your mutant is getting physically stronger, like your stats do improve, and I don't think that they go back down, they only sort of go up and up.
I think, yeah.
Whereas your abilities, which the mutants are blocked out of certain slots in their inventory because of their innate abilities, they can also change. And so you might have a really cool ability that does a bunch of damage or something else really useful, and then a few fights later, that ability could just get wiped out completely. So it's a little bit more of a gamble, but if you're expecting to have a character that sort of levels up with the combat, that's more like what the mutants are.
100%. And 4 of their inventory slots are taken up by their abilities.
Yep.
And the number of times I reset because my one ability that I really liked got, randomly re-rolled was a lot. I reset a lot.
I think that that's actually like advice that is given in like the manual or whatever, is to reset if something like that happens. I just let it ride, baby. I did not even keep track.
Oh yeah, before I saved every single time, I would go into the ability menu, check my one mutant, make sure that they still had, the attacks that I wanted them to have, and then I would save. So at the end, I think my mutant had thunder, flame, and gas, which are all like
super strong. Yeah,
like multi-hit damage spells. And if any of those got re-rolled, I would just hit all of the buttons.
All right, so we're definitely getting into some like mechanical gripes, perhaps, and I want to can that because we still need to cover the monsters.
Fair enough.
So the last type of character that you can have on your team is a monster. You can start with a couple different ones, and the way monsters work is that they can't equip anything, they can't hold anything, no armor, no items, no weapons. Whatever stats and abilities that they have as the type of monster that they are, that's it. That's all they get. But unlike everybody else, they get to have a basically infinite source of those things, because kind of like a Pokemon, their power points or their spell points or whatever to use their abilities replenishes when you rest in an inn. The big gimmick for monsters is that non-humanoid enemies in combat will drop monster meat, and you can feed the meat to your monster party member, and if the monster is a compatible type of meat, then your monster party member will shift into a different type of monster. Again, though, this could be good or bad, and you really don't know and can only maybe guess that the higher level monsters, like if you're fighting a monster stronger than your current monster party member, then maybe you'll get a better outcome. Whereas if you feed it meat from a weaker monster, it might regress. But there's really no way to know, unless I guess you dive into game facts and you look up a flowchart of what turns what into what. But otherwise, it really feels like a total just kind of crapshoot on it. But that's what makes the monster unique.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. I do like that mechanic a lot, actually.
Yeah, I found it interesting and unique, and I found it extremely frustrating.
Of course.
I will say I did use a guide for a lot of my gameplay.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I got through everything, and, while I think the developers, even when they created the game, they wanted something that was like less than 10 hours to complete, there is a lot of stuff here, and it could, I think, very easily take twice that. So I did use a guide, and the guide gave kind of these monster meat, kind of like you said, a flowchart. And it was extremely frustrating trying to figure out, like, okay, I'm currently this type of monster. If I eat this type of meat, I will then become this other type of monster. And then figuring out the levels, quote unquote levels of each monster, what you would become, because you can go up a single level when you eat monster meat, but then if it doesn't all line up, you can go back maybe 2-3 levels. And so while I found that mechanic quite interesting, if I did not have a guide, I feel like it would have been even more frustrating.
Okay, so party members done. We have assembled our party. We're setting off. I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to continue on. Did you beat the game?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I did not, and I won't. I played, I want to say, probably close to 4 hours total. I sank more time into this game than any other game that we've played so far.
100%.
And out of that entire time, I only made it out of the first area and started climbing the tower. I got to one of the next areas and I called it quits. I had seen everything I needed to see. The mechanics were frustrating in more ways than I was willing to deal with. And so I did not need to actually beat this game. So I did not look at any guides. I played entirely blind. The only time I used anything for reference was after I finished about the first hour and a half of gameplay. I read the manual, which I will say is very long.
Yes.
It's like 80 pages front and back, which is, it's like more than every manual we've had combined so far.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very explanatory, and it even has basically a walkthrough of the entire first area of the game, start to finish.
Yep.
That's a lot to help you get something out of this game. And without going too far into wrap-up talk, mechanically speaking, without a guide, or at the very least without reading the official manual, this game is like an ancient language that you just will not be able to functionally understand.
Yeah, and that was one struggle that I had, is that the game doesn't explain what anything is in game.
Right.
So there's no item descriptions.
Nope.
Nothing kind of pointing you to, you know, the ESP spell that mutants get. There's nothing telling you what that does.
Nope.
So there are a lot of times where you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to try to use this thing. Oh, it doesn't work the way I thought it did. I 100% agree. I think the game could have done a lot better in explaining certain things.
Yeah.
The game does a decent job with the NPCs kind of telling you things, but I kind of think like old school Zelda, those sorts of things where it's like, oh, if you get on this one thing, it now takes you to a new place that every other time you've dealt with that, it didn't. So, yeah, I don't know.
Classic is the word of the day. Everything about the game, even with all of the new and interesting ideas that are on offer here, like the monster meat, evolving your monster party member, and the way that mutants progress. I mean, even I guess buying your stats for your human character isn't something that you necessarily see in a lot of other RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
So there are some interesting mechanical ideas here. And you can see the DNA of this game in so many other games, even just here on the Game Boy. I mean, look at Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
That's all about evolving monsters into other monsters, and then they get new abilities, and they tweak a lot of the obnoxious stuff, like it's not random, and you get to keep your abilities as you go and stuff like that. But you can still see the seed idea from this game into those other games. So I like that new and interesting stuff, but the old school RPG stuff, I just don't like. And I know that that's probably, it's just like a personal taste.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you like wizardry, that type of RPG where when you get into combat, even though there's only 2 enemy sprites on the screen, you're actually fighting a group of 8 or something like that. And none of your attacks carry over. So if you kill one group of enemies, everybody else on your team just misses their attack because they don't bother to shift over to the group next to them. Like,
yeah, they're just like, oh well. Yes, I have this other werewolf, fighting me, but meh, I'll take this turn off.
Yeah, it's just like a free break. Like they just get to sit this one out. You also pay a gold per HP at the inn instead of a flat fee, so that gets expensive really, really fast. And while we're on the subject of expensive, this game's economy is whack. Like, buying your upgrades for your human characters, okay, fine. That is a cost that I can absorb. Sure, whatever. Buying equipment and things like armor, okay, that's fine. I buy the armor, it sits on my characters until I replace it. Yippee. Weapons, having what is essentially durability, but only if you squint, when in actuality, it's more like you're buying temporary use abilities for your characters.
Yeah.
And also, depending on what kind of character it is, they're more proficient, but what proficiency they have is a secret. And also they get more proficient the longer you use them. Like, there is so much mechanical guts here in this game.
But you don't know about it. It's all a secret.
Exactly. And it's so obtuse that even as lengthy as the manual is, they just don't go into all of that. At no point in the manual, and please, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but at no point in the manual do they tell you humans are good with this weapon, or don't use all of your weapons before they're gone because the more you use the weapon, the stronger it gets, or whatever. Like, I am almost positive that the only reason I found out about that sort of thing is from reading and watching other people's thoughts and opinions on the game well after I had stopped playing, because you buy 100, 200, 400 or 500 gold weapons and magic spells and stuff. And then you truck your way across the map to your next location, which thankfully they're reasonably small, even though they're kind of boring to look at. And you've got a really limited inventory, so you hope that you have enough potions and equipment and everything else. But then, oh no, your monster ran out of attacks. Well, they can't equip a weapon, so they just literally can't do anything the rest of the fights. Oh no, your human ran out of attacks. Well, is there anything that you can equip them with? Nope. Well, they can't do anything the rest of the fight either. So you've got to either hope you can finish or stop what you're doing and walk all the way back. So that's what I mean when I said that for the 4 hours plus or whatever that I spent on this game, I do not feel like I made it very far at all. 3 hours of that 4 hours or so that I played was a lot of just standing in one place and reactivating the same fight with an enemy, because some of them are random and some of them are not. And so I was just standing next to one of the enemy NPCs, just constantly re-engaging in the same fights over and over again to just grind for money and then leave.
That is kind of the last thing I had in the mechanics as well, is that I feel like a lot of the time it was kind of a grind fest, which I'm kind of the classic RPG like grinder, get overpowered so the rest of the game is not a game. But I feel like this game almost requires that in a lot of times when, yeah, you have to buy a new weapon. You have to, make sure you have enough attacks left. So a lot of the time, yeah, I feel like you're just grinding for money. And yeah, it turns into a grind fest of just walking back and forth, random encounter, defeat the enemy, get 40 gold or whatever, and then just do that ad nauseum. And I think you'll probably see a lot of that in my footage as well.
And a grind fest isn't necessarily something that I have problems with. I grew up on RPGs like this. I'm not opposed to having to grind out for some extra equipment or special drops or money or experience or whatever. I don't necessarily care about that if it's done well. Here, it's not. The real sticker about why the grind really got to me in a way that I didn't appreciate is because I was grinding against these enemies. I would get the money, I would go back, and I would make incremental progress. I would buy 1 or 2 new weapons, or a handful of stat upgrades for my 2 human characters, or I would have to go back to the inn and dump 200 gold into healing my party or whatever. And then I would go back and do it over and over and over again. And finally, when I thought I was ready to move to the next part of the game, there is a massive difficulty spike. And no amount of grinding really fixed that. By the time that I got to the Sword King and was ready to do that fight, I had all of my party equipped with the best armor available, the gold armor. I had all of the strong weapons, and my monster was a pretty decent addition to the party. Like, I was ready to go. And walking through that area, there's an enemy there that's just called the Karateka. They're like these martial arts looking ninja guys or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They have one attack that's really annoying. It does a lot of damage and makes an obnoxious sound. And so when you've got like 4 or 5 of them in a group at the same time, it is just hair-pullingly frustrating. So they were this wild difficulty spike in an area where I was at this point like one-shotting most enemy encounters pretty consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And then I get to the boss, and the boss was just like 2 turns and the fight's over because I won. It felt like untested, because after I left the first area, you know, you get all the icons and you put them on the statue and you head up to paradise or whatever, up the tower. Once you get through there, most of the enemies that I was fighting in there were all not pushovers necessarily, but they were not causing me any problems until I got to the slimes, who all of a sudden were just hitting my party for like 40 damage at a piece. And I was like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Where did this come from? So like the difficulty is just so wildly out of sync a lot of the time. And no amount of grinding really took care of that. It wasn't like my party was scrubs and I couldn't figure things out. I was equipped with the best stuff I could and had dumped thousands of gold by this point into my human characters. And I was still fighting enemies that were hitting me for massive amounts of damage when none of the rest of the enemies around them were even inflicting damage on me with their attacks. So like, it really felt almost untested in some places, I guess.
Yeah, I guess like most RPGs, but I would agree with that. I think the extent of it is maybe a bit more on this one.
Sure, I expected a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, it's not weird to have like 1 or 2 enemies that are really strong and they only show up in like rare encounters or something, but that's not what it was here.
Yeah, I agree with that. We could obviously talk a lot more about the mechanics.
Sure.
There's a lot more here that we haven't mentioned, but I think that's probably a decent place to go ahead and take a little break and then come back and talk about the creative stuff of this game.
Yep, I am recentering myself, and we will be back after the ad break.
All right, Tony, let's try to get this in one take. Maybe stay to the script this time? You're live in 3, 2...
A horrible global phenomenon is being reported in the modern era. Children who don't know what a Game Boy is.
I don't think it's that serious.
If you or anyone you know has children suffering from a chronic lack of retro gaming, we recommend subscribing to the Critical DMG podcast. We're experts on the Game Boy.
I'm absolutely not.
And we here at Critical DMG will ensure that everyone knows about the Game Boy, whether they're young or old, pro or noob.
Does anyone say noob anymore?
So don't wait. Share this podcast with your friends and loved ones that have kids, your coworkers, their kids, your board game group's kids. Spread the word. Play it out the windows of your car in the elementary school drop-off lane.
Please don't do that last one.
With your help, we can work to undo the damages of time and make everybody appreciate the Game Boy. Thank you.
All right, yeah, that last part's pretty good.
Mama, did they ever make a Sonic game on the Game Boy?
No, afraid not, dude.
What about a Rayman game?
They did, but it's a Game Boy Color exclusive.
Ugh.
Sorry, kiddo, but Critical DMG is supposed to cover all the North American games on the original Game Boy, and in chronological order, too. That means we'll be talking about the ones you don't already know.
Well, was there at least a Mega Man game?
Yeah, a few of them.
Yay! I'll definitely listen to those episodes when they come out.
Great. The show should get to the first one sometime in 2028.
But that's so long from now.
Yeah, you're telling me. And we're back. So, Uematsu Nobuo composed the music for this game. That's a Final Fantasy link. There's a Final Fantasy thing in there. The Final Fantasy guy did the Final Fantasy music in here. And I have to say, the rest of the music doesn't necessarily hold up as well, but the title track is one of the best pieces of video game music that we've had on the Game Boy so far. I can't put it any plainer than that.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to add on that. Yeah, it's just so good. From what I could tell, it's stereo sound as well. So it kind of like fades left to right. I don't know if we've experienced that before or if maybe I was just not hearing it correctly. But for the most part, I would say music, very good. Title track, amazing. Title screen, a little boring, a little plain, I would say.
Yeah, disappointing because the Japanese version of the title screen has some really neat like screen effects going on with the text as it like comes in. So kind of a shame that we didn't get that here, but it serves its purpose, and that title track sets the mood like nothing else really could. If nothing else comes from listening to this episode, check out that song at the very least, and definitely make sure you are listening to it like with headphones on. If you're playing this on original hardware, this is definitely one you want to plug headphones into your Game Boy's headphone jack for. It is worth it. The rest of the music, it's okay. There are some tracks that are better than others, but I think that this one is just kind of suffering from the RPG curse, which is that when you are grinding over and over again in the same areas, unfortunately, you're going to hear the same music for a really long time over and over and over again. And if it's really good, that's a little bit easier to deal with. But even if it's mildly good, it's a lot easier for it to get under your skin because you are just soaked. You're oversaturated in it all the time.
Yeah, I will say I played most of it without music, not because it was bad, but just because, yeah, exactly what you said. When you're kind of grinding, trying to level up, etc., you don't really need the music. You don't really need any of that. And it kind of like wears out its welcome quite quickly.
It does.
So I definitely agree with that.
So did you mute the game entirely while you were playing? You didn't hear music or sound because there's not really like a music off option in the game.
Yeah, I just didn't have my headphones in.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just curious because that's part of the reason why some of the enemy fights as well were obnoxious. Like I said, the karateka enemies probably wouldn't even been as frustrating if the sound from their kick attack wasn't so annoying to hear over and over again. You know, it's just like this really quick, like kind of noise. And, you know, the way that battles work is even though there's only one sprite on the screen, it could still be a group of like 4 or 5 of that enemy.
Yep, who all do their own attacks.
Exactly. And so they'll all do the same thing, and some of them will just go off over and over and over. And it's just really irritating to hear. So eventually, when I was in that area and stuck, I pretty much muted my game too, because I was just tired of hearing it. I was trying really hard not to throw in the towel just because that section was overly frustrating, and that was before I had read the manual. But they made it really hard. So it was either mute the game or stop entirely, because there's a lot to like here aesthetically. The enemy sprites in particular are very, very cool and cute.
Yep.
As are the player sprites. They're also very cool and cute. But the attack animations, they're fine for what they are, but they're recycled so heavily that you almost can't really tell them apart most of the time.
Yeah. I do have to ask, do you have a favorite, I guess, monster sprite that you found? So all the monsters kind of have their own sprite. Some of them are shared between different monster classes, but
of course, there's like it says there's 170 in the game. Yeah, it's 170 split between like 40 or 50 different sprites.
Yeah, but do you have a favorite? Yeah, overworld sprite as you're walking around as one of the monsters.
Let's see. I don't really think I have a favorite overworld sprite. I think they're all done really well, and I like that they're very cute. I also like, and this is not really necessarily anything, but I also like that the armor king, his like quest for you is to go and tell the girl that he loves her, and the girl that he loves is just like an eyeball monster.
Yeah, just kind of like a octopus eyeball.
I love that.
Thing.
It was amazing. I was like, good for you. Good for you. Love is love.
I quite like the worms. They look kind of exactly as you would expect, a little like worm or snake. I think those are probably some of my favorites, but frankly, I think they're all quite good.
Yeah, they're all cute. The sprites are just amazing from pretty much top to bottom. I don't really have any issues with any of the enemy sprites or the player sprites. All of the actors and objects are high tier. It's the backgrounds and the tiles that I have problems with.
Okay.
The background being blank in the fights, like in combat, I don't care. That's fine.
Yep.
Especially because the sprites are so big and there's so much menu stuff on the screen anyway. I don't care. That's totally acceptable. I would rather have big, cool sprites of the different monsters than haphazard
stuff happening in the background.
Yeah. Like if they're going to do a really cool background that maybe changes, like in a forest, then you get a forest background. If you're in the desert, you get a desert background. That kind of thing I would appreciate. But if they're going to go with overlarge sprites, no background is fine. I'm totally okay with that.
Yep, I agree.
But the overworld tiles are awful. They're either really boring or just not there at all. There is a lot of the game, and this is just from obviously where I had played through, which is the first section, so I can't make any claims for all of the sections after that. Jeff, you'll, I guess, have to chime in on that front. But there are lots of portions of that first area of the game where you could almost get lost because you can walk for several steps in any direction and nothing changes. It's like a flat single color background the entire time and nothing is there. No landmarks, no other tiles, no walls. And if you don't know where you're going, it can get really easy to just be completely turned around. And when you're playing a game that's got random encounters and you can run out of your inventory and you have to pay 1 gold per HP when you get back at the inn, that is a real problem.
Yeah, so that does kind of persist throughout.
I figured.
I will say, you know, the second world is like a water level.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more like water tiles.
Yep.
Then you have like a sky level and the tiles are more like cloud and kind of like that sort of thing. So as you go further, there does get to be, I think, more world building in the tiles that they use.
Sure.
But yeah, especially in the first area, I agree. There are times where it's just a completely blank screen with your sprite in the middle. And I wouldn't say it's like too big that you kind of really get super lost. Kind of like you mentioned earlier, the worlds are all relatively small.
Right.
But yeah, there are definitely some times where if you're not aware of kind of like where you're at, because there's no like overworld map or anything like that.
Nope.
You can definitely get lost in a sea of nothingness. So, like I said, it does kind of change and you do get a bit more as you go further on. But you still have that same things are very similar, or the lack of like an overworld map does kind of lead to maybe a bit of confusion as to where you're going.
And thankfully, at least in the beginning areas, the maps aren't big and they aren't really confusing. There's not a lot of like side paths you can take or hidden areas that you can go into. And the most that really will trip you up is like puzzling out where to go next. Like, oh, I need to go here because the king needs me to go talk to this girl. Oh, where's the girl? South. So you just got to walk south. Oh, I got to fight the bandit. Where's the bandit? West. Okay, I got to walk west. Like, that's fine. That's not an issue. And I know that there are more in-depth puzzles later, but that's not anything to do with, oh, wow, this map is like a maze. I have no idea what's going on. No, they're all pretty self-contained. It's just a matter of you've got to go to the right place at the right time, and press a button in the right area to uncover a secret item and stuff like that. It's very similar to Gargoyle's Quest that we covered, which actually we had called kind of like the first RPG that we had, because of the similarities of like leveling up your character and item buying and stuff like that. But there was a lot of just wandering around the overworld and checking random areas for hidden items in that game too. So it's just kind of like a trope, and some people deal with that and some don't, but at least it's not the maps that are the problem. You might get a little turned around if you are really struggling, but only a little bit.
Yeah. And it sounds like we're close to wrap up talk.
I think so.
The last thing I do want to mention in the creative discussion is that I love that most of the time you just have like a katana or a sword or a hammer. And then there's also just like missiles and guns and like a nuke you can get. I just kind of found that kind of comical, that it's like most of the game, you're kind of classic RPG. Yeah, like, I have a whip. And then it's like, oh, you can just have a SMG, like, machine gun. Okay, cool. But that's the last thing that I kind of wanted to speak about.
I think the only other thing that I wanted to say is, and this kind of ties into what you were talking about just now over the, like, oh, there's submachine guns and nukes and whips and all kinds of magic spells and things. I actually really can kind of get behind the stripped down storytelling that is going on here. The manual does a lot of heavy lifting as far as storytelling goes. Like, if you do read through the manual, you do kind of get a more full picture of what the game is trying to tell you. But even that aside, let's say that you never really check the manual for any of that sort of thing, you still kind of get the idea of what you're doing. You are an adventurer. There is this mysterious tower, and anybody who climbs it can make their way to paradise if they do a good job. And that's basically it. And you just make stops off along the way, solving other people's problems, leveling your character up until you ultimately reach the pinnacle of the tower and the end of the game. And that's fine. I don't have any issues with that here at all. Not every RPG needs a grand story. And I think that part of the reason that this game has the really long time to beat isn't because it's got a really grand story to tell, which might be what some people expect for an RPG, but because of the grinding and the constant looping back and stuff that you've got to do. But it's hard to make that distinction just from like a on its face numerical value. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the speedrun for this game, I think, is like an hour.
Oh, I'm sure.
So if you know what you're doing, you can move through pretty quickly. But that is a great segue into kind of my final thoughts on this.
Please, go ahead.
Is that while, yes, I would recommend this game, if you do not have some sort of guide, I think it's possible to complete the game, but I think it would be extremely frustrating because there are a lot of extra things, or a lot of kind of like, yeah, the kind of classic Zelda RPG thing where you might just miss this one key bit of information and spend an hour trying to look for how do I progress. And so, yeah, without a guide, I think it would be a much more frustrating experience than I had because I was following a guide. And so that's kind of my final thought on it is it's worth it, but yeah, look some stuff up, have some idea before you get into it.
Yeah, and I will tack on to that just because I guess I didn't think to fit this anywhere else. Not only can you potentially miss things that might be really handy or make your playthrough much simpler or easier, you can also just straight up soft lock yourself because the game does nothing to stop you from getting rid of items that are really important earlier than you're supposed to. Like, you could accidentally sell an item off that it turns out that you need later on in the game, and there's just no way to get a replacement.
Yeah.
So, game over for you. That stinks.
Yep.
And so I guess that's my own segue into my own thoughts, and I'm having a really hard time giving this one a yes. There's too much here that me, RPG fan that I am, the types of RPGs that I like to play, I don't gel with. And I've played most of the Etrian Odyssey games, which are sort of similar to this in that you have groups of enemies that can stack and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're a lot more modern than this game is, and they've got a lot more quality of life things and bells and whistles. And I also like that you're drawing your own map on the 3DS screen and whatever else. So I think that the archaicness of this game really sticks in my craw in a way that I just can't get over. And so I also had the second one of this game when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure that's the one that I remember more fondly. So I'm pretty sure that's the one that I'm going to like better. I think I'm going to say final answer on this one is, if for no other reason than history and posterity, this game is worth the batteries. But if you don't have a manual or a guide or many hours of your life to spend on it, I am not coming back to this one. As much as I really thought I was going to, I can't see myself coming back. Maybe for other people, there is more to like here, for people that can appreciate the fact that the eccentricities of this game are not just fun, but also wildly detrimental to your own playthrough. I'm just not into that.
Yeah, I think we're both kind of on the same page. There's a lot to do here. There's a lot of interesting stuff, but also it could be a huge time sink if you don't know what you're doing. So if that's something you're interested in, great. If not, then probably stay away.
Yeah. You want to spend, how long to beat, say, like 10 to 12 hours or whatever?
Mm-hmm.
You want to spend that 10 to 12 hours potentially only making it like halfway through the game, depending on how good you are and how well you interpret the guide and everything else, or honestly, just how RNG kind of shakes out for you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's your jam. Anywho, that's enough of that. Let's move on to something lighter, maybe.
Quiz time. Currently at 82.9%, doing all right, and we'll see how Final Fantasy does.
You're gonna have your own quiz legend. All right. Final Fantasy Legend quiz. Question 1. Not only is the Final Fantasy Legend our first traditional RPG here on the Game Boy, but like we said, it's also the first game to have some really major differences between the North American and Japanese versions. The title going from Makai Toshi SaGa to the Final Fantasy Legend is only the beginning of all the changes and unused things that can be found under the hood here. Some of the issues are fairly obvious, like how a party character's combat menu will just read, in all caps, "You can't use the item," but it spills past the screen limits when you're out of things you can do in combat, basically. Others you would only really know about if you had played both versions, or if you dug into sites like the Cutting Room Floor to find them out. Having said that, which of these is not something that changed between the North American and Japanese versions of this game? A. Some infinite use weapons in Japan were given 50 uses in North America. B. The ability Sing actually confused enemies in the Japanese version. C. There's a gun icon for the gun type weapons that isn't included in the North American version. Or D. It's actually all of these and more.
I'm gonna go with D. I'm not gonna think too much on it. I'm just gonna go with D and hope that all of those things are the case.
It is D. It is all of those things and even more things.
Let's go.
On top of text errors and number errors, the translation and adaptation process to get the game out in North America introduced all kinds of problems and bugs into the works. Powerful later game weapons that should be infinite use are given only 50 uses, while a different powerful weapon that should only have 1 use is also given 50 instead. The credits text is completely missing from the end of the game, and the ability Sing, which should confuse all the enemies, only ends up playing the sound effect for the song and not doing anything else. So that's not a great sign for these games in the future, but I'm choosing to stay optimistic. Doing good. First one down. Question 2. While we are still on the subject of the Japanese and North American version differences, one of the more fun things to pore over were all of the changes made to enemy names due to length. Since the Japanese language's character system can fit more information into a small space than the English alphabet can, lots of the puns written into the names of the enemies in the Japanese version are lost to us here in North America. Not to mention any of their allusions to Japanese-centric items, or history, or media. So tell me, which of these things is not referenced by an enemy name in the Japanese version of the game? A. The mythical 8-headed snake of legend, Orochi. B. The giant robot number 28 from classic manga and anime series, Tetsujin Nijuhachigo, or Gigantor. C. A Japanese culinary ingredient, tororo, which is made of grated yams, or D, anything relating to Ultraman.
Oh, these questions are not in my previous research. You dug a bit deep. I'm gonna go with B. I don't have a good reason for that, but I'm just gonna go with B.
Well, it was D, actually. Yeah.
Sad.
You would think so. You would think that there would be Ultraman stuff, and maybe there is something obscure that I'm just not familiar with. I did check a couple different places to see if anybody had said that. There is some other tokusatsu stuff in there, but no Ultraman that I could find. So lots of the enemy sprites are duplicates as the game goes along, but their names do change.
Yep.
And so among them, you've got references to Japanese historical figures, food items, anime and manga, the Bible, the Buddha.
Interesting.
All right. 1 and 1 isn't bad. That's fine. We'll finish up with the last one. Question 3. In the April 1991 issue of Nintendo Power, the section called the Counselor's Corner is entirely taken up by a fairly unambiguous walkthrough for a portion of the Final Fantasy legend to help solve one of the more obtuse puzzles that readers and players of the time would be dealing with. I mean, I guess, or now too. On the following page, though, is a section on news and reception to current Game Boy releases. This being April 1991, which would have been several months after the Final Fantasy Legend had already been out in the US for players to pick up, it's nice to see that the game sits proudly at spot number 3 of 10 on Nintendo Power's current top 10 Game Boy games. But what about the games in the number 1 and 2 spots above it? Is it true or false that even in April 1991, the number 1 and number 2 games on this list are both games that we have already played on the show?
Oh, I think that has to be true. I think we've gotten some like real bangers. So yeah, I'm gonna say true.
Good guess, because it is true.
Let's go.
Yeah, the answers might be a little, maybe not what you're thinking of though. So the number 2 game, do you want here? Actually, go ahead and guess. Toss me out 2 games. What do you think are number 1 and number 2 Game Boy games so far?
I mean, I would have said Tetris and Super Mario Land, but I feel like those are not it based on what you just said.
So nope. So I'll give you number 1. Number 1 was Super Mario Land, which obviously classic, great game. We've already talked about that one in our early episode, but a little interesting that even April 1991, it is still number 1 spot on this list. Number 2 is TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan.
Interesting.
Yeah, I can only assume that just has to be like Turtle Mania.
Yeah.
1991 has to be, turtles are ubiquitous. That's got to be what it is, because this is like Nintendo HQ employees, sales info from retailers, and then readers who voted in the players poll. So like all of this information coming together to put TMNT Fall of the Foot Clan at number 2 is like, it's got to be Turtle Mania. It has to be. I can't think of anything else other than that, because it was a fun game. I don't think it's number 2 Game Boy game fun though.
Yeah, no, I agree.
What will really shock you is game number 6 on this list out of 10 was Paperboy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All of these old lists are just, I'm going to say wrong. But 2 for 3, not bad.
Not bad.
I'll take that. Can you remind us what our listener quiz from last week was?
I can. That would be Cosmotank's question. So much farther back in the Nintendo Power issue that I talked about in that episode, which would have been the September-October of 1990 issue, there was a section in the back where they talk about this upcoming new product for Japan, this big special announcement, tons of technical specs and upcoming game releases, and Nintendo Power wants to make sure that you are there to get the hard facts and not wimpy rumors, they say, about this hot new development in Nintendo technology. Jeff, whatever could they be talking about?
I mean, what would have come out in around that time?
Okay, so Nintendo's been out. Game Boy is out. What's next?
Maybe the SNES?
It is.
The Super Nintendo?
Yeah, it's the Super Famicom releasing in Japan.
Yeah.
That was their big thing. So the Super Famicom was due to come out. We, in the US, in North America, we wouldn't get our shelves full of Super Nintendo consoles until basically a year after it came out in Japan. In Japan, the Super Famicom was released in November of 1990. Nintendo talks about the graphical power and a very small handful of games that are supposed to come out for it. And that's basically it. They don't really tell you anything else about it other than it's going to have really cool graphics and good specs, and that there's going to be a Mario and a Zelda game on it. And stay tuned otherwise.
Yeah, I didn't know if at this time it would have already been out, but I guess this would have been the time that they were advertising for it. So that makes sense. Do you want to let us know what this week's listener question is?
Of course I do. Final Fantasy Legend audience question. So I guess another first potentially here on the show. One thing I haven't dug around too much for, despite loving many of these things when I revisit them these days, are old TV commercials. So this game was solidly popular and impressive enough at the time to potentially merit some TV ad spots now and then. I decided to see what turned up when I went looking, and thankfully I found one uploaded via the Video Game Commercials YouTube channel, but it was honestly pretty disappointing. Despite saying that the ad was for Final Fantasy Legend on the Game Boy, it's actually mostly just a 30-second commercial for a different game. Pretty much spends the whole runtime talking about something else, and the game that they're talking about isn't even a Game Boy game, it's on the NES instead. So even though this does technically have Final Fantasy Legend tacked on in the commercial, I want to know what game they spend the majority of the commercial talking about. It is a radical racing game that was originally released on the NES, but what is it, Jeff?
No idea.
I didn't. I don't even know this game. I had never heard of it. So, I'm sure somebody might have, but I am not as well versed in NES as I am Game Boy. So this one was new to me, but we'll have to find out next week.
We'll have to find out next week. Thanks for listening to Critical DMG. If you would like to support us further, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/criticaldmgpod. Join us there for monthly newsletters and extra content. Otherwise, please leave a review wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe recommend us to your friends or anyone else you might think that would like the show. It really helps us out, and we appreciate it. And I think that brings us to the end of probably the longest game that we've played so far.
Mm-hmm.
Join us next week when we have, kind of a bit of a different, I guess, game or genre.
Oh no.
We're going to heavyweight championship boxing.
Oof, okay.
Quite a bit different than, our first Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, what a jump.
But join us next week and maybe we have more fun than I think we might have with it.
Punch Out's a cool game. Maybe boxing could be a cool thing. I like fighting games, so maybe I'm gonna go in thinking optimistically about this one, let's say. So everybody can hold me to that and see if I come crashing down in despair next week. So until then, anyway, bye everyone.
Goodbye.